Emily Carter believed her life was simple and steady, the kind of life many people quietly wished for. She lived with her husband Daniel Carter in a peaceful neighborhood outside Portland, where tall trees lined the streets and the evenings were calm enough to hear the wind moving through the leaves. Emily worked at a local library, a place filled with quiet corners and stories that made her feel safe. Daniel worked for a marketing company and usually came home at the same time every evening, greeting her with a tired but warm smile. For 10 years their marriage had followed the same gentle rhythm. They ate dinner together, watched shows on the couch, talked about work, and planned small weekend trips. It was not an exciting life, but Emily believed it was a happy one. She trusted Daniel completely. He had always been calm, thoughtful, and respectful. They had built their relationship slowly, starting as college friends who spent hours studying together and sharing simple dreams about the future. Back then Daniel used to say that Emily made him feel peaceful, like the world made sense when she was around. Emily carried those memories in her heart and never imagined their story could suddenly change. But on one quiet autumn evening everything began to feel different. The air was cool, and orange leaves covered the backyard like a soft carpet. Emily was preparing dinner while soft music played in the kitchen. She expected Daniel home at 6 like always, but the clock moved past 6:30, then 7. When the front door finally opened, Emily noticed something strange immediately. Daniel walked inside slowly, as if he had been thinking about something heavy all day. He greeted her, but his smile looked forced, and his eyes seemed tired in a way she had never seen before. Emily asked if work had been stressful, but Daniel simply said it had been a long day. They sat down for dinner, and for a while everything seemed normal. Emily talked about a new book that had arrived at the library, and Daniel nodded politely while eating. But there were long pauses in their conversation. Daniel kept looking at his plate as if he was deciding whether to speak. Emily began to feel a quiet tension building in the room, the kind of feeling that appears when someone is hiding an important thought. After several minutes of silence, Daniel finally took a deep breath and said her name in a careful voice. Emily looked up and noticed his hands were resting tightly together on the table. "Emily," he said slowly, "there's something I've been thinking about for a while." The seriousness in his tone made Emily's heart beat faster. Daniel was not someone who started emotional conversations without reason. She asked what was on his mind, expecting maybe news about work or a problem he needed help with. But Daniel's next words surprised her completely. He said he felt like their lives had become too predictable. At first Emily did not understand what he meant. Their life had always been peaceful and routine, and she believed that was part of their happiness. She reminded him that comfort and stability were not bad things. Daniel nodded and said he agreed, but he still felt something was missing. He explained that lately he had been wondering if they had stopped growing as individuals. Emily listened carefully, confused but trying to understand. Then Daniel said something that made the room feel suddenly colder. He suggested that maybe they should take some time apart. The sentence landed between them like a stone dropped in water. Emily stared at him, thinking she had misunderstood. She asked if he was talking about a temporary separation. Daniel hesitated before explaining further. He said he believed that meeting other people and experiencing life outside their routine might help them understand their feelings better. Emily felt shock move through her chest as the meaning slowly became clear. Daniel was suggesting that they date other people while still being married. For a moment she could not find words. The idea felt strange, painful, and confusing all at once. She asked him quietly if there was someone else he already cared about. Daniel quickly said no and insisted that this idea was not about replacing her. He claimed it was about honesty and self-discovery. Emily walked to the kitchen window, trying to process what she was hearing. The backyard looked peaceful in the fading evening light, yet inside the house everything suddenly felt uncertain. She remembered the early years of their marriage when Daniel used to hold her hand during evening walks and talk about building a future together. Those memories felt distant now, like scenes from an old photograph. Behind her, Daniel spoke again, explaining that many couples lose themselves in routine and never question whether they are truly happy. He said he loved Emily deeply but wondered if they had both become too comfortable to notice the changes in their hearts. Emily struggled with the idea. Part of her wanted to reject the suggestion immediately, but another part wondered why Daniel felt this way. Had she missed signs that he was unhappy? Had their quiet life slowly turned into emotional distance without her noticing? The questions filled her mind. Daniel promised that he was not asking for divorce. He said he believed this unusual step might actually help them understand the strength of their relationship. Emily listened but could not ignore the pain growing inside her chest. The man she trusted more than anyone was asking for freedom from the marriage they had built together. That night they continued talking for hours, trying to understand each other's feelings. Daniel remained calm and patient, but his determination made it clear that this was not a passing thought. He had been thinking about it for weeks. Emily eventually went to bed feeling exhausted and emotionally lost. Daniel lay beside her in the darkness, close enough to touch yet feeling strangely far away. She stared at the ceiling while memories from their past moved through her mind: their wedding day, their first small apartment, the day they bought their house, the quiet mornings when they drank coffee together before work. Those moments had always felt like proof that their love was strong. Now she wondered if love alone was enough to protect a marriage from change. As the night grew deeper, Emily realized something she had never imagined before. Their relationship had just entered a place filled with uncertainty. Daniel believed exploring other connections might reveal the truth about their marriage. But Emily could not stop asking herself one painful question. What if the truth led them further apart instead of bringing them closer? And as sleep slowly came to her restless mind, Emily understood that the peaceful life she once trusted had already begun to shift in ways she could not control. The days after Daniel's unexpected request felt strange and heavy for Emily Carter, as if her normal life had quietly slipped into a story she no longer recognized. The small house outside Portland still looked the same wooden floors, the same soft light coming through the kitchen window each morning, yet everything felt different because the certainty she once felt about her marriage had begun to fade. Emily continued going to work at the library, greeting visitors with polite smiles and organizing shelves of books, but her thoughts often drifted back to the conversation that had changed everything. Daniel, meanwhile, tried to act normal at home. He was still kind, still calm, still respectful, yet there was a careful distance in his behavior that Emily could feel even during simple moments like dinner or watching television together. One evening, while they sat quietly on the back porch watching the sun go down behind the tall trees, Daniel gently brought the subject up again. He explained that he did not want to hurt her and that he still believed honesty was the most important part of their relationship. Emily listened with folded arms, feeling unsure about every word he spoke. Daniel told her they did not have to rush into anything and that they could take things slowly, but his idea remained the same. He believed spending time meeting new people could help them both understand what they truly wanted from life and from each other. Emily asked him a simple but painful question. She asked if he already had someone in mind. Daniel quickly said no, but Emily could not fully read his expression. After several long talks that stretched late into the night, Emily agreed to try the arrangement, though her heart felt uncertain. She told herself that maybe Daniel was right about one thing: their lives had become very predictable, and perhaps this strange experiment would help them reconnect in some unexpected way. Still, agreeing did not make the situation easier. Over the next few weeks Daniel began spending more evenings outside the house. Sometimes he said he was meeting colleagues for drinks after work. Other times he simply said he wanted to clear his head and take a walk around town. Emily noticed the change but tried not to question him too much because she knew this situation had been his idea from the start. Instead, she focused on her own routine at the library. The library had always been a peaceful place for her, filled with quiet corners and the comforting smell of old books. It was there, during an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, that Emily met someone who would slowly change her emotional world in ways she did not expect. His name was Ryan Mitchell, a history teacher from a nearby high school who often visited the library to research materials for his students. Ryan was tall, friendly, and easy to talk to, the kind of person who made conversations feel natural even with someone he had just met. At first their interactions were simple. Ryan would ask for help finding historical books or documentaries, and Emily would guide him through the shelves with her usual calm professionalism. But over time their conversations grew longer. Ryan enjoyed discussing stories from the past, and Emily enjoyed hearing the way he explained history with excitement and curiosity. One afternoon they began talking about a novel Ryan had noticed on the recommendation shelf. Emily explained why she loved the book, describing the characters and the emotional journey inside the story. Ryan listened closely, clearly interested not only in the book but in Emily's thoughts about it. When she finished speaking, he smiled warmly and said she had a special way of understanding people through stories. Emily laughed lightly, brushing off the compliment, but inside she felt something she had not felt for a long time. She felt noticed. Their conversations continued over the following days, always friendly and respectful, yet slowly becoming more personal. Ryan asked about her favorite travel dreams, her childhood memories, and the reason she loved working with books. Emily found herself sharing pieces of her life that she had not spoken about in years. Meanwhile, Daniel's life seemed to be moving quietly in another direction. One evening, after several weeks had passed, Emily finally gathered the courage to ask him directly if he had met someone. Daniel hesitated for a moment before answering honestly. He told her he had recently started seeing a woman named Sophia. The name echoed in Emily's mind with unexpected weight. Daniel quickly explained that it was not serious and that they were only getting to know each other, but Emily could hear a spark of excitement in his voice that made her chest feel tight. She tried to stay calm, reminding herself that this situation had been discussed and agreed upon. Still, hearing the reality of it made the arrangement feel very different from the idea. Daniel described Sophia as creative and energetic. She worked at a design studio in Portland and enjoyed art, travel, and photography. Emily nodded quietly while listening, though her heart felt heavy with emotions she struggled to understand. After that conversation, Emily began noticing small changes in Daniel's routine. Some evenings he stayed out later than before. Other nights he seemed distracted while they spoke, as if part of his mind was somewhere else. Emily did not accuse him of anything because technically he had been honest from the beginning, but the emotional distance between them grew slowly day by day. During this same time, Emily's friendship with Ryan continued to develop. One afternoon Ryan invited her to join him for coffee at a small cafe near the library after work. Emily hesitated because she knew the situation with Daniel was already complicated, but she also remembered Daniel's words about meeting new people. She decided there was no harm in a simple conversation outside the library. The cafe was warm and cozy, filled with soft music and the smell of fresh coffee. Ryan talked about his students and the funny questions they asked in class, which made Emily laugh in a way she had not laughed in weeks. For the first time since Daniel's request, she felt light again, as if the heavy cloud above her thoughts had moved aside for a moment. Ryan noticed her relaxed smile and told her she deserved more days like this. His kindness touched her heart, though she tried to keep her emotions balanced. When Emily returned home that evening, Daniel was sitting in the living room reading something on his phone. He looked up and asked about her day, and Emily briefly mentioned meeting a friend for coffee. Daniel nodded calmly, but she wondered if he truly understood how much their lives had already started to change. Weeks passed, and both of them quietly continued exploring their separate paths. Yet deep inside Emily felt a growing question that she could not ignore. What had started as Daniel's idea to understand their marriage better was slowly becoming something much bigger. It was creating new emotions, new connections, and new uncertainties that neither of them had fully imagined. And as winter approached, Emily began to realize that this unusual experiment might not only test their love. It might reveal truths about their hearts that could change their future forever. As winter settled over the quiet town outside Portland, the distance between Emily Carter and her husband Daniel slowly became more noticeable, not through loud arguments but through the quiet spaces that now existed in their daily life. Their home still looked warm and familiar, yet the feeling inside it had changed. Some evenings they spoke politely over dinner, but their conversation stayed short and careful, like two people trying not to step into emotional territory that could hurt them both. Emily focused more on her work at the library, arriving early and often staying later than usual, because the quiet rows of books gave her a sense of peace when her thoughts became too heavy. It was during those long days at the library that her friendship with Ryan Mitchell continued to grow naturally. Ryan visited often to prepare materials for his history classes, and each time he stopped by they talked about books, music, travel dreams, and the small details of everyday life. Ryan had a calm and thoughtful way of listening that made Emily feel comfortable sharing things she usually kept inside. He never asked questions that felt too personal, yet somehow he understood when she was having a difficult day. One snowy afternoon Ryan suggested they take a short walk after the library closed because the town square had been decorated with winter lights for a seasonal festival. Emily hesitated at first, reminding herself that her life was already complicated, but she also remembered the agreement she and Daniel had made months earlier. They had promised to be honest and open about exploring new experiences. So she agreed to join Ryan for the walk. The town square looked beautiful that evening, glowing with soft lights and filled with families enjoying warm drinks and music. Emily and Ryan walked slowly past the decorated stalls, talking about childhood memories of winter holidays. Ryan shared funny stories about his students trying to act serious while secretly getting excited about snow days, and Emily laughed more freely than she had in weeks. For a moment she felt like the heavy thoughts about her marriage had stepped aside. As they stood near a row of glowing lanterns, Ryan looked at her thoughtfully and said she seemed like someone who carried a lot of emotions quietly. Emily smiled but did not answer right away because his words felt closer to the truth than she expected. Ryan gently added that whoever had made her feel uncertain about herself was risking something special. The kindness in his voice touched Emily deeply, though she still avoided explaining the full story of her marriage. Meanwhile, Daniel's life had also continued moving in its own direction. His connection with Sophia had become a regular part of his routine, and although he never hid it from Emily, the way he spoke about Sophia revealed excitement that Emily had not heard in his voice for a long time. Sophia worked in a creative design studio and enjoyed photography and travel, and Daniel often mentioned the interesting places she wanted to visit someday. Emily listened politely during those conversations, but inside she sometimes felt a quiet sadness growing in her heart. One evening Daniel was getting ready to leave for dinner with Sophia while Emily sat on the living room couch reading a book she had barely been paying attention to. Before walking out the door, Daniel paused and said he hoped Emily understood that none of this meant he had stopped caring about her. Emily gave him a small smile and told him she knew, though she was no longer sure what their marriage truly meant in this strange new reality. After he left, the house felt silent and empty. Emily placed her book aside and realized how much their lives had changed since the night Daniel first suggested exploring other relationships. What began as a conversation about rediscovering themselves had quietly turned into two separate emotional journeys. A few days later, Ryan invited Emily to another small event in town, a winter market that only lasted one weekend each year. Emily thought carefully before accepting because she knew her feelings for Ryan were slowly becoming stronger than simple friendship. Still, she felt drawn to the kindness and warmth he showed every time they spoke. At the market, they walked among the small shops, sharing hot cider while soft music played in the background. Ryan talked about his dream of someday writing a book about forgotten stories from American history, and Emily admired the passion in his voice. As they stood watching snow fall gently under the market lights, Ryan turned to her with a quiet seriousness and said he was glad their paths had crossed. Emily felt her heart beat faster because she realized she was beginning to care about him more deeply than she had planned. Yet life rarely moves in simple directions. The following evening, Daniel returned home earlier than usual. Emily noticed immediately that his expression looked thoughtful and slightly troubled. They sat at the kitchen table where many of their most important conversations had happened before. Daniel took a slow breath and admitted that things were becoming more complicated than he expected. Emily felt tension rise in her chest as she waited for him to continue. Daniel explained that Sophia had recently told him she wanted something more serious. She was beginning to see their relationship as a real future rather than a temporary connection. Emily listened quietly, feeling a strange mixture of surprise and sadness. She asked Daniel what he wanted, and he hesitated before answering. His silence spoke louder than any quick response could have. For the first time since their unusual arrangement began, Daniel looked uncertain about the direction his life was moving. He admitted that while he enjoyed Sophia's company, the situation had forced him to look at his marriage with Emily from a new perspective. The freedom he once believed would bring clarity had instead created emotions he did not fully understand. Emily felt the same confusion within herself, because her growing feelings for Ryan were also beginning to change the way she saw her future. As Daniel looked across the table at the woman he had shared 10 years of life with, he seemed to realize that their experiment had reached a point where choices would soon have to be made. Both of them had stepped into unfamiliar emotional territory, and the decisions ahead could shape the rest of their lives. Emily understood that the quiet stability she once believed defined her marriage was gone forever. What remained now was a difficult question neither of them could ignore. Were they discovering new paths away from each other, or were these experiences revealing the deeper value of the bond they had built over so many years? And as the winter night grew colder outside their home, Emily felt certain of one thing: the next chapter of their story would require honesty, courage, and choices that could change everything. Emily Carter believed her marriage was simple, peaceful, and strong, the kind of relationship that quietly grows deeper with time. She lived with her husband Daniel Carter in a calm neighborhood outside Portland, Oregon, where tall trees lined the streets and the evenings were usually quiet enough to hear birds settling into the branches. Their house was not large, but it was warm and comfortable, filled with little memories from the 10 years they had spent together. Emily worked at a local library, a job she loved because it surrounded her with stories and calm routines. Daniel worked in marketing for a growing company in the city. Their life followed a steady pattern. Daniel left for work every morning around 8, Emily left a little later, and in the evening they returned home to cook dinner, talk about their day, and relax together. It was not a dramatic life, but Emily believed it was a happy one. They had met 12 years earlier during college in Seattle, when both of them were shy students who preferred quiet coffee shops to loud parties. Daniel had first spoken to Emily during a study session at the campus library when he noticed she was reading one of his favorite novels. That simple conversation turned into hours of talking, then many walks across campus, and eventually a relationship that felt natural and calm. Daniel used to tell her that being with Emily made the world feel peaceful. Emily believed those words deeply and carried them with her into their marriage. Over the years they built a routine that felt safe. Weekend mornings meant coffee and pancakes, Sunday afternoons meant grocery shopping together, and summer evenings often meant sitting on their back porch watching the sunset. Emily never thought much about excitement or adventure because she believed stability was the real sign of love. But sometimes quiet routines can slowly hide feelings that people do not talk about. On a cool autumn evening, everything began to change in a way Emily could never have predicted. The day had been normal. Emily finished organizing a new section of books at the library and drove home under a sky filled with soft gray clouds. She started preparing dinner while music played quietly in the kitchen. Daniel usually arrived home at 6, but that evening the clock moved past 6:30, then 7. When the front door finally opened, Emily felt immediate relief, but as Daniel stepped inside she noticed something unusual about his expression. He looked thoughtful, almost nervous, as if something important was on his mind. Emily greeted him with her usual warm smile and asked if work had been stressful. Daniel said it had been a long day, but his voice sounded distant. They sat down to eat dinner together, and for the first few minutes their conversation followed the normal pattern. Emily talked about a new mystery novel that had become popular at the library, and Daniel nodded while listening. But there were longer pauses than usual, moments where Daniel seemed to be searching for words. Emily began to feel a quiet tension building in the room. After several minutes, Daniel finally placed his fork down and looked directly at her. "Emily," he said slowly, "there's something I've been thinking about." The serious tone in his voice made her heart beat faster. Daniel was usually calm and confident, but tonight he looked uncertain. Emily asked him what was wrong, expecting news about work or a problem with a colleague. Instead, Daniel took a deep breath and said something that surprised her. He said he felt like their life had become too predictable. Emily blinked in confusion. She had always believed predictability was part of their happiness. She reminded him that having a stable life was something many couples wished for. Daniel nodded and said he agreed, but he still felt something was missing. He explained that lately he had been wondering if they had both stopped growing as individuals. Emily listened carefully, trying to understand his meaning. Then Daniel spoke the words that changed everything. He suggested that maybe they should take some time apart to explore life in a different way. At first Emily thought he meant a short vacation or time to focus on personal hobbies. But Daniel continued speaking, and his explanation became clearer. He believed that meeting new people and experiencing life outside their marriage might help them understand what they truly wanted. Emily felt the room grow very quiet as the meaning of his idea slowly became clear. Daniel was suggesting that they allow each other the freedom to date other people while still remaining married. The idea felt shocking and confusing. Emily stared at him, wondering if she had misunderstood. She asked him gently if there was someone else in his life already. Daniel quickly shook his head and said there was not. He insisted that his suggestion was not about replacing her or ending their marriage. Instead, he said he believed honesty and exploration might help them discover the real strength of their relationship. Emily stood up and walked toward the kitchen window because she suddenly needed space to think. Outside, the backyard looked peaceful with fallen leaves covering the grass, yet inside the house everything felt uncertain. She remembered their wedding day, the moment they promised to build a life together, and all the quiet evenings they had shared since then. Those memories felt warm and safe, and she struggled to understand why Daniel felt the need to change something that seemed stable. Behind her, Daniel spoke softly again. He said he still loved her deeply and did not want a divorce. He believed that sometimes couples become so comfortable that they stop truly seeing each other. According to him, a little distance might help them rediscover the feelings that first brought them together. Emily turned back toward him with questions filling her mind. Was Daniel unhappy in their marriage? Had she missed signs that he wanted something different from life? She realized that routine had slowly taken over their relationship. They still cared for each other, but they rarely talked about dreams or fears the way they once had. Their life had become organized and predictable, but maybe it had also become emotionally quiet. The conversation continued for hours. Daniel remained calm while explaining his thoughts, and Emily listened with a mixture of sadness and confusion. Eventually the evening ended without a clear decision, only a heavy silence between them. Later that night Emily lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept beside her. She thought about their early years together, their laughter during road trips, the excitement of buying their first home, and the many small moments that once made their relationship feel alive. Now she wondered if those feelings had simply changed over time without either of them noticing. The man she trusted most in the world had just suggested something that challenged everything she believed about marriage. Emily realized that the quiet life she loved might never feel the same again. Daniel believed that exploring other connections could help them understand their relationship better, but Emily could not stop asking herself one painful question. What if opening that door changed their marriage in ways they could never undo? And as the night grew darker and sleep slowly came to her restless mind, Emily understood that their peaceful story had just taken an unexpected turn that might shape the future of their lives forever.